My first day as an elementary school principal, a young girl with perfectly parted afro puffs ran up to me on the playground and said, "So you're our new principal?" And when I said yes, she very matter-of-factly said, "I didn't know black people could be principals." Cool. And then she ran off smiling. In that moment, I remember feeling two ways. One, I was so glad she knew now. And two, I was so deeply saddened that she didn't know that before. That defining moment in my educational career is a perfect example of why our attention needs to turn to how black girls are experiencing school. It also confirmed for me that a new lens in education was needed. And so, drawing from Cooper Ryder's appreciative inquiry model and a more culturally affirming pedagogy, I call this lens a pedagogy of appreciation, which is rooted in how we use teaching and learning practices to appreciate what is and what is possible and not perpetuate what is broken. And although the subject of my talk is focused on black girls' education, a pedagogy of appreciation can help us build the next iteration of education for all students. So let's take an appreciative stance. Black girls, black excellence, black culture, black joy, black genius, black minds. Let those words settle for a moment. Let them live inside your mind, not as hashtags or headlines, but as truth, powerful, sacred truth. And as you hold on to that truth, I'm going to pose a question that should not be revolutionary, but is. What if school were a place of liberation for black girls? And I ask this anchor question because after 20 years of service as a teacher, a principal, an activist, and most recently as a black school founder, it is the question that guides my most important work. It's our important work, really interrogating why the beauty, creativity, and brilliance of black girls is not being represented in their collective educational outcomes. It's not being reflected. More than 70 years after Brown versus the Board of Education, the disparities for black students remain not only persistent, but painful. Less than 20% of black students are reading on grade level. The discipline gap continues to grow, with black girls receiving the most disproportionate punishments. And one of the most alarming, a 182% increase in suicide rates for black girls in recent decades. Our system has failed them in so many ways, and yet it's often portrayed as if it's our girls who have failed, as if they somehow just can't get it right. And I have to wonder what that does to a child's spirit, to her sense of connection. Decades of policy change, increased funding, and reform haven't effectively changed the landscape, and we have to be brave enough to ask why. Why is there such a disconnect between the beauty and brilliance of who we know our girls actually are and how the outcomes in schools portray them to be? And that's the dilemma. Our black girls are navigating a system that doesn't always reflect them, name their brilliance, honor their roots, or nourish their minds. In fact, black girls are often having an educational experience with so many pieces left unsaid. And although this is a very complex topic that requires much more attention, research, and urgency, today I offer my perspective, not just as an educator or school founder, but as a black woman who once was a black girl in our schools. So journey back with me to my 11th grade year, come on, where I walked into that classroom of Mr. Lee. He was the first black man and one of only 2 black educators that I had in my K-12 education. He taught multicultural studies and opened up a world to me at school that I didn't even know I was missing. For the first time in the classroom rather than at home, I learned about times in our history like the Harlem Renaissance and Black Wall Street and people like W.E.B. Du Bois and Zora Neale Hurston. I had so many cultural revelations during the time with him, not just from what he shared with us through the curriculum that he built himself to meet our needs, but also from the intentional time that he took to listen to and laugh with us, to incorporate our perspectives, and to challenge us to think more deeply about what we were learning and how it applied to our lives and to our community. I blossomed in that classroom in ways I hadn't expected because Mr. Lee took the time to honor the joy, the intellect, and the brilliance of the Black experience, my experience, not only talk about our struggle. He never used the words pedagogy of appreciation, but he taught about the best of us, which helped us see the best in us. Now, that worked well over 25 years ago, and I contend that an expanded version of that approach is our way forward, one that calls our girls into the process by appreciating who they are, where they come from, and how they want to revolutionize their own educational experience. A pedagogy of appreciation is about redefining teaching and learning to uplift the wholeness of who our students are. It's a participatory approach that incorporates the 5 C's of identity consciousness, creative high-yield learning models, a co-constructed design, community-rooted education, and cultural fortification. So what does all that mean? Let me give you a glimpse of what it means through an example. A recent example at our middle school is when our girls engaged in a study of North Omaha living legacies. They began by sharing locations on a map of North Omaha that held personal meaning for them. And then from there, they explored the idea of legacy and chose one of 6 Black women in our community who are currently impacting North Omaha in positive ways. They then learned interview skills from a reporter from our local Black newspaper, and then researched in our university library. They synthesized the information into biopoems and biocubes about their person's life. Now, while they were doing all this high-level work as 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, they had no idea that we were going to be surprising them with visits from these living legacies. I know. And so you can imagine that some of the most powerful moments came when the girls met and interviewed the women themselves. And through their excitement and how honored they were by the women's presence, each of our girls rose to the challenge and even left our senator and our city's first lady in awe at the level of research they had done and the insightful questions they asked. I even heard one participant share that a USA Today reporter that interviewed her had nothing on our girls. So through this experience, they learned so much more than just what a biography is. They saw their identities reflected through women from their own community, and they had the opportunity to shape their learning journey. Culture and community were at the heart of the work and not an afterthought. And what happened? It was so beautiful. The girls left more conscious and confident. And the women, they left saying, I wish I had experiences like that when I was in school. And everyone left more affirmed and nurtured, challenged, and impactful. And that's a real life example of using a pedagogy of appreciation. It's an intentional way to educate at a very high level, using co-designed curriculum, weaving in Black culture, and then having an opportunity for self-expression and identity affirmation. It honors our community as experts and co-educators in our students' education. And it also incorporates the richness of our community's stories, traditions, and local history. In addition to all of those elements, a pedagogy of appreciation actually calls for us to hire and also support conscious educators who are representative of the student population and ensure that anyone who interacts with our girls knows how to see Black girls fully and teach them well. And that means with care, respect, and high expectations. Heavy on the high expectations. To me, a pedagogy of appreciation, the biggest piece about it is that it's about respecting our girls enough to not only talk about appreciating them, but actually enacting the changes that are needed to enrich their experiences, improve all of those outcomes, and make a positive difference in their future. And the stakes are high, so let me be clear. This is not just about Black girls. This is about all of us. Because when we create environments where Black girls are deeply seen and valued, everyone benefits. A pedagogy of appreciation strengthens education for all by amplifying cultural curiosity and academic excellence, collective accountability, and radical love. And so I think back to that little girl with the Afro puffs on my first day as principal, and I can't help but wonder what would have happened if she had been receiving the kind of appreciative, identity-affirming education that I propose. Because if she had, she wouldn't have needed to use a single ounce of her energy questioning whether she or I belonged there. Instead, she could have used that same energy to nurture her authentic genius and just be. And so I ask you again, what if school were a place of liberation for Black girls? And what is the next step that you will take to ensure we're not asking this same question 7 more decades from now, but rather leaning into appreciation to reshape education today? After all, it's what she deserves. It's what all students deserve.